And one, and we are live. And welcome everyone to a really interesting Thursday. And today, I think our topic was going to be hosting a virtual event, and in particular, a virtual summit. Like, what does it take to do that? And I think more apropos to this particular moment in time, it's how do you do any kind of hosting of a major thing or a launching of a major part of your business during a crisis when everyone's attention is off in some other direction? We could even be talking about how do you do a live stream when everybody's attention is elsewhere. So stay tuned. I've got a really special guest. Her name is Moran, and Mia and I have known each other for several years now. We actually are neighbors. We live in the same community of Arlington, Massachusetts, which, if you don't know Arlington, it's right next to Cambridge, Massachusetts, which of course is right next to Boston. And they used to call this place West Cambridge. But then, I don't know, the elders of Arlington said, no, we need our own name. And they voted and said, we'll call ourselves Arlington. I'm not quite sure why that happened. I sort of like West Cambridge better myself. But in any case, Mia and I both live here. And she is someone who, she's an award-winning graphic artist. She is an author of an amazing book called Plan Simple Meals. And her original business was all about helping families get together in the kitchen and eat well and have fun and be more like families, which I think is an amazing mission. But lately, dealing with sort of the overwhelm that pretty much everyone has in their life, no matter who you are, she is now sort of this planning expert and helping people organize their lives in a way so that they're no longer feeling like nothing is organized and my life is upside down and it's all in disarray. And Mia is someone who in the last year has decided to start hosting these virtual summit events. And this is what I really want to dive into today, is sort of like, why did she do it and how she do it? So let me just bring her on, and welcome to the show, Mia.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Sure. It's
really... And I never knew the West Cambridge piece. So now I'm like fascinated. I'm like, wait, what? I could still live in Cambridge. I love it.
I know, right? It would be a more aspirational address to be West Cambridge than
maybe
someplace.
Maybe we have to embrace Arlington.
Right. Okay. So why don't you just say a little bit about what you're doing now? Like, what are you doing these days? And then sort of speak to, and why did you decide to start doing this virtual summit? Like, how did what you're doing lead into that?
All right. So, well, first of all, I love helping people and I love coaching. Like, I've naturally coached friends, I think, since I was, I don't know, younger. And I don't know everything. So I think one of the things that I've been really intrigued with ever since, hopping into the wellness space was just learning as much as I possibly can. So the idea of interviews has always been like high on my list of things to do. So when we are now called Plan Simple, but when we were Plan Simple Meals, really that all started with a magazine that was all interview based. And then at some point, I started having conversations with people in various ways, which led to a podcast and which then led to Summit. So the idea of just having conversations has just always been part of my way to get knowledge and pass knowledge on. So I think that's how that all started. And then there was also some strategy behind it in terms of building my business, which I can get into in a second. And what we're focused on right now, and actually why summits came into play from a content standpoint, is that, we're really about how we serve women mostly. We serve all women, and mostly women who are moms. And what I found when I was doing all the work with food was that somewhere along the line, we just got this weird sense of time and what we could and couldn't accomplish with it and where we were supposed to spend it and what was right and what was wrong. And the second a woman becomes a mother, it's like, am I a working mother or am I a stay-at-home? Like, there's all these things that just start to tell the story of our life, basically. And I just think a lot of it can be pushed. A lot of it is based on a lot of old ideas. And so that's how I got into time. And as you mentioned, I noticed that nobody was making time for good food, which I'm pretty passionate about.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So bring it to like, not exactly the present, but sort of this past year. I know that you decided, and actually this is something that we talked about probably almost a year or so ago, about this idea of creating some kind of gathering, virtual gathering, where you know, beyond all the other stuff that we might do in terms of especially an online business,
Yep.
you know, what was the attraction of doing a virtual summit for you?
Well, so what started to happen when I got into the planning side of things was that, first of all, very instinctually, I grabbed onto the idea of a 90-day plan instead of like thinking about our year goals or whatever. So I loved the idea of 90 days to figure out how to move our life forward. And I started all of that with the intention of just getting people eating better in 90 days. And then quickly, you know, somebody would eat better and then they would want to build a company and then they would want to declutter their house. And there was just all these different goals that were coming up for people. And I had had a food journey and I know some things about business, but there's so many people who know so much more than I do. And so I just wanted to have conversations, really showing others what's possible in 90 days in different areas of life. So that was kind of the idea behind having deeper conversations. And the reason that I made it a summit was because still to this day, our business is really, it's a coaching program that's either 90 days or a year. And one of the most important components of it is a 3-day retreat that kicks off every 90-day planning period. And I just loved the idea that women could have this retreat experience from the comfort of their home. And that was part of our business way before COVID. And the summit, I just got to thinking I had the experience of having to leave my house to fly to Arizona to go for 3 days and learn about something. And the experience was wonderful, but there was just so many more things I wanted to learn than the amount of times I felt like it was okay to like leave everybody home. And, I was thinking especially people with, younger kids or, who didn't want to travel. But when I thought about the summit, I was just, a lot of people do a summit where it's, one video a day or, there's lots of different ways to do it. And I just got to thinking like, what would an actual live event be like? And how can we replicate that online a little bit more than maybe what's being done? And so that was sort of the seed for our first summit.
Okay. So first of all, I really love the idea of creating conversation, like having an opportunity for people to have real, genuine, much more meaningful conversation. Yep. And so in your, this is you, you're creating this event. Now, how many other people did you involve with this particular?
So we've had 3, and we did 2 that were one. We've done 3 that have all been different. Our first one ever was 1 day. And our second one was 3 days, but spaced out 1 day a week so that we sort of gave people time to land back in their lives and then come back on. And then the third one was 2 days. And you acknowledged at the beginning of this about launching in the middle of a disaster. Pretty much 2 out of the 3 were amidst big world things that were happening. So 2 of them happened during COVID. And one of them on the second day was when George Floyd was killed. So it was in the middle of that piece of our history. And it was a big distraction away from everything. And so I just learned a lot about what needed to happen to have conversations. And so, I'm just going to take one step back because the other thing I wanted to say is the strategy as well behind wanting to just create this online thing. The strategy behind a summit, in case anyone's wondering about that piece, is that it's a way that if you bring speakers into your summit, they can share it with their audiences, and then you have their audiences, you can speak to their audiences. And so it's a way to bring a group of people together who you might not have access to, normally in your list. And the way that we did it was we pre-recorded the interviews, but during the day, we got to go live. And that gave us an opportunity to merge the content that we were trying to share with whatever was happening currently, which was really important when the world was sort of falling apart around us.
Yeah, right. That's so cool. Well, okay, so just sort of in terms of numbers, like when you were doing your 1-day summit versus the 3-day summit, how many people did you have as speakers on either of those two occasions?
Okay, so the first one, we had too many. I think we had 11. And I'm trying to think if all of them, I think we probably had 8 speakers. And the other thing I decided to do is I really wanted everyone to have an experience of what it is that we teach, as well as just getting content. So one of the things that's really important for me to teach is that what good food does for somebody in a day and what moving their body does for somebody in a day. So along with speakers, we also had someone come on and do a yoga class and someone come on and do a meditation, and we sent out a meal plan so people were eating really well during the day. So that was sort of included in all those talks. So the first one, we packed way too much in, and I could see over the course of the day that like the first one had hundreds of views, and then by the end of the day it was like a couple hundred of views, Mm-hmm. So you could see just by the numbers that was, it was too much. And so the reason that we tried the second way of doing 3 days and spacing them out was we had less speakers per day, but we also gave people a little bit longer to take in the content. And I think that would have been my favorite way if the world wasn't crashing down around us at the same time, because that definitely affected, the way people were showing up to the content. And the day that it was divided into 3 topics. So the first one was about wellness, the second one was about lifestyle, and the third one was about entrepreneurship. And in the middle one, the lifestyle piece, it didn't take into account all the stuff that I would take into account right now about diversity. I mean, I learned so much. So, we were definitely hit with that. But that said, in that 3-day event, we had so many speakers that we had a lot of, our lists exploded. So, the amount of people watching definitely grew by the amount of speakers that were speaking. But if I were to do it again, I would say 6 or 7 speakers is great in a day.
Right. So, okay. So I really like the idea of you're combining a pre-recorded interview with a live session, which is almost like a debrief. What are the takeaways? How can we go deeper?
Yeah.
With this information? And you were alternating those? Is that how it's set up, or did you do it?
No, I just, what did we do? We did 1 or 2 a day, depending on which event we're talking about. And we did try some lives like this. So we did try some Facebook lives, but I actually preferred the Zoom, like we would stream a Zoom live, but I preferred the ability to also have people, in Zoom able to talk to each other if they needed to. Mm-hmm. And the thing about going live is if your business model is that you're gathering all these people and you're selling this thing, and that's the thing you're making money from, that's one thing. But that wasn't my model. My model was I wanted as many people as I could get to come. And I wanted them to get a lot of information. And then I wanted to show them how they could actually implement that, because that's what we do. And so having the lives enabled me to teach as the person putting on the summit, which is, I think, something that a lot of people who put on events forget. Like they forget themselves as they're planning all these conversations. So that's why we had those. And they were really impactful, especially when stuff was going on, to be able to bring the conversations that we had recorded, if we hadn't taken everything into account, and then put them live. Like a lot of in the middle one that we put live, I think probably maybe 7 of the 30 conversations had been recorded before COVID. And then it got launched in COVID. So where there was just things that we had to correct. And then the other thing is that on those calls, sometimes I invite the speakers. So if there's speakers that want to answer questions or have more to say, it's a time where we, more than one speaker can get on and talk, which is also really fun.
Right. No, I like that. That's really great. And I just as a technical point for people who are viewing right now, the thing about live streaming and where you like doing a Facebook Live or using Zoom or whatever, I just want to point out that the tool that we're using right now, which is called Restream, allows you to do both those things. Like you can be streaming onto Facebook, you can combine it with Zoom so that you can have a Zoom call with 100 people attending or more, and you can live stream that whole experience onto all these other platforms if you wanted to. If you want to make this a public, or at least a part of your event public, you could be streaming onto YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn or even on Twitter all at the same time, simultaneously. And just want to put that in there because Restream is actually the sponsor of this event.
Yay.
They're our good buddies. And if anyone is interested in checking that out, just give me a second here. I'm going to put up the link. If you want to go join Restream, here's a link that you can use to join. And if you do this, you'll get a special deal. That's restream.io/join/show-up. And that will get you into the stream. And you can actually, you can sign up and start using this for free indefinitely, just with a couple of destinations. You could be, you could be streaming onto Facebook and onto YouTube at the same time. So thanks, Restream. Right. And so I just want to carry this a little bit further in terms of the kinds of things that you were doing. First of all, I'm a little bit in awe of the fact that you pulled this off. Because I know that it happened during some really, first of all, that it happened in the middle of COVID appearing.
Right.
And then also another event that you hosted, we had the George Floyd murder happen right in the middle of that, which is another huge disruption. So these are things that we don't think about when we're planning in the future. However, apparently, in the new normal, this is going to be part of what happens. And so what you're talking about in part is that you've been able to pivot, but also to have a flexibility in the design so that even though some of the stuff was pre-recorded and done, way before any of this stuff was even occurring, you and at least some of your guests some of the other speakers were able to come on and do live presentation, which made part of this event actually work.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And that definitely made it work. Cause I think I would take that lesson with me to every event I do from now on, because I will just assume that something will always happen. And then if it doesn't, great.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, totally. All right. So in the execution of your stuff, one of the things that you mentioned is that doing this is, for the host, for the person who's thinking about doing anything like a virtual summit, one of the big outcomes is that it's going to build your authority. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of that comes from these peer-to-peer relationships that you're creating with the other speakers. And so I know you've had some pretty good outcomes that have just come from the fact that you've now met and gotten to know a number of these other speakers pretty well. So could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a way, and I find the same thing with a podcast, which I know that you speak around a lot as well. Like just having conversations like this, and with people you don't even necessarily know, is connecting, and it's just a really good way to gain the trust of other people. I mean, I wouldn't say go do that just so you can gain the trust of other people, but it's a really good way to get to know somebody. I mean, I would say it's probably the best way I've gotten to know people, because it's different than a networking event or a conference. You just have a different level of conversation because you're really getting, into the nitty gritty of whatever it is they do and what you do and figuring out where those things overlap.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, basically, with this kind of thing, as well as in a podcast series, your job as the host is to make your guest look good.
Yeah.
And you are literally, as well as, whatever audience they may be bringing to the event, they're benefiting, like you're benefiting them because they're now in front of this collective audience of all the speakers. So it turns out to be this really nice, it can be this really nice collaboration between you and them and everybody else involved.
And I also, by nature, am a matchmaker, but I would recommend other people become one if you're not. But I, it's really fun also to introduce speakers to each other, right? Because we all have these networks of people or different ideas we have of how these things are going to go together. And the people who are speaking don't necessarily know each other. And it's been really fun to connect other people that way too, which obviously anybody appreciates, including your speakers.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So let's talk a little bit about how did you monetize these events? Like, what did you have in place so that, and the events were free? Is that correct?
So the events were free when they were for a short amount of time while they were live, right? So if the event was on Friday, then it was free, usually all day Friday and then all day Saturday. I always give my audience a little bit of extra time because I know it's a long time to be engaged in something when you're balancing probably work and motherhood. So it was free then. And then if you couldn't make it, if you knew in advance that you couldn't make it on the free day, or you just knew you wanted the content, because sometimes people want to be able to come back to the content, or usually what we do is we have like a workbook or worksheets that you can download, but if you're not going to do all the work right then, it might be helpful to have the videos. And so people could also opt in to upgrade right away, which was one price. And that lasted sort of up until the event. And then during the event was another price. And then after the event, it was another price. So we sort of had 3 different tiers of prices. And speakers definitely were affiliates. So they got 50% when, any of the different prices sold. But the monetization strategy was really around selling on the other side. Like I would say, definitely the events covered themselves and some, but the strategy was to really get people who wanted to keep working with us.
Right, sure. So basically the overarching goal is to build your audience, build a larger list, and then nurture them into your regular programs. Yeah, just like that. All right. So I know that summits as a thing, like pre-COVID summits, definitely had a reputation of being kind of overdone. Yeah. Somewhat in the way webinars have done. So, and I know that you approached creating a summit in a much more creative way. Like you added some physical things. Yeah. You added some activity. Like, could you talk about like, what did you do that was different and sort of taking it a step beyond the normal summit experience?
Well, I mean, I thought about that going into it because I have been also, if you're an entrepreneur, you've probably been approached to be on a summit. And I had said yes to be on to a couple summits who I then had to send an email for, and I didn't feel comfortable sending the email because the picture was not great, or like the content wasn't something I would ever say. And I just felt not great about sending it, which is probably the reason it took me a while to pull off having a summit. I feel like people have been telling me to have a summit for years before I finally decided to have it. And so I just knew that it had to feel really sort of like good to want to be part of this thing, and to, it needed to feel cool to want to share it. And I just wanted speakers to know that they were going to get a lot of value. So I just got to thinking like, what would give them value? So the first thing I got to was just that idea that I already shared of like, I wanted this to be a different kind of event. Like I didn't want it to feel like the summit in a box that everybody was doing. And that's where I got to the idea of making a comprehensive day instead of just finding a random assortment of speakers to come talk on things. We also did that piece where we added in, the yoga and the meal plan. And interestingly enough, and all those people were also, they weren't speakers per se, but they were all partners. And so they were sharing as well. And we had a lot of speakers in all 3 summits go through the summit, which I thought said a lot. Like they actually showed up and did the summit because they wanted to learn from all the other people. So that was a thing. And then, as you mentioned at the beginning, I am a designer, and one of our products is you didn't mention this part, but one of our products is a planner. And so I just decided I'd make a really beautiful workbook, magazine, and like planning sheets that went with every talk, and that I would give those back to the speakers in the cases where that made sense. So so I just, mapped out like how would these speakers actually understand that they were going to look good. Like, right. The whole point was to make them look good. And I wanted to make sure that they knew that that would happen.
Yeah, that's really a lot.
Yeah.
You did a lot.
It's definitely gotten easier. Like the first time I was like, oh my gosh, there's no way this is worth it. Mm-hmm. And then, each time you do it, it gets easier and easier. It's not all.
So what are your plans for 2021 in the summit space?
Good question. So one of the things that so the two of the three summits have been have been the same summit actually with different speakers. Mm-hmm. And we called them Make December Matter. And they both ran, 2 different years in November, and were geared at helping people slow down in December and plan for the following year. And that felt really great. And then that one in the middle that was 3 days was all about, and Brad was a speaker, was all about creating a 90-day plan for very specific goals. And I think the next one is going to be something that I'm just interested in knowing more about, and actually, figuring out my place and making a change in it, which is people changing their food habits, and, how to do that in a way that's a little kinder than what we do right now in this time after New Year, when everyone's like, I need to lose 20 pounds. And like, why is it like that? Like, why do we have that thought? Why are we so mean to ourselves? All those things. So I really want to I want to be a student myself as I'm putting on the summit. So I think that's what's coming up next.
Cool. Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
So we got a question here. Whoops, wait, I don't want to do it that way. I want to do it this way.
Oh, how I monetized it?
Yeah. A question from Tobias. Even though we already went over this, it's okay. We'll do it again. Did you already tell how you monetized this summit? Maybe I missed that.
Yeah. So, and actually, I don't know that I told all the ways. So a couple ways. And a lot of this was due to the fact that bad things kept happening in the middle of all my summits. So the plan was that we would make some money just by selling the summit itself. And I played around with different prices. There was an early bird of 47, there was a 97, and I think we ended up charging all the way to 197, depending on when you bought it. And, that was great, and definitely covered all the bills and then some. And, we had affiliates, and it always feels good for speakers to make some money. So that was great. But the real monetization strategy was in selling into our program on the other side. So, knowing that we would then have a month to really nurture people and get them to understand the benefit of showing up and making a plan, and where they might have some holes and want some accountability, which is what our programs are. But the other thing that I started doing is I started taking pieces of the content and like repackaging it together for smaller products. And that has actually been really helpful in creating new content, and new either freebies or low cost products, or bonuses to bigger things that I've been launching.
Right. So you did this. So you have a series of small products, but you have this bigger thing. And it sounds like there's some timing involved. Like, the summit is a piece of what essentially is a launch of bringing in a whole new bunch of participants in a program. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And like, so for example, in the last version of Make December Matter, which was right before Thanksgiving, it was great. It was a very well-attended event. It went really well. And on the other side of it, there wasn't like a global situation. We were still in the pandemic, but there wasn't a global thing. But I actually had a house thing. Like we had an emergency here, and I had to like not follow through on my whole plan. So what ended up happening was 2 weeks later, some of the content, like Make December Matter, once we were in December, didn't feel as resonant, but there was so much great content in there around New Year's planning. So I just took that content and redid the sales page a little bit and extracted that and made a new cover for it. And all of a sudden we had How to Plan 2021, and it was still amazing content. It just made sense as that instead of December. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that's a really good point to put an asterisk next to. And that is, when you create an event like this, a 1-day summit, 2 days, whatever the length of time is, what you've created is a series of interviews, of all these different thought leaders. And each one of those is a whole bunch of content.
Yeah.
Which you can use in a variety of ways, whether it's to monetize in the future, or you can take a summit that you made, depending on what the subject matter is, and basically redo it, like relaunch it to a new audience in the future, somewhere down the road, where it's not all new interviews, it's the ones you had from the previous one.
Yeah, I was mapping out the other day our year of podcasts, and I have my own little New Year's goal to work a lot less hours and make more money. So, actually it's specifically to work 20 hours, which is a lot less than I've been working. So I was just trying to figure out where I could be more efficient. And one of the ideas that came up, I'm not sure if it's the one I'm going to use, is that, for the amount of interviews we've had on summits, we have a years of podcasts. We have a year of interviews. And so if that made sense, it would be an easy way to have content and not have to worry about that piece for the year. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's a whole nother, you could do a whole summit just on how to work less and make more money.
Yeah, maybe that'll be the topic. All the things I want to learn about this year. Yeah, for sure.
I think that would be a great one. I would go to that one. I'll contribute. We all need to practice working less and making more money.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a practice. The first week has been a little sketchy.
Right. We're always, whatever. There's still 51 weeks left, or what is 49 weeks left?
This is true. This is true.
Right. So, okay, well, let's just sort of bring this wrapped up a little bit. If we have somebody out in the audience, and I look at the numbers here, we've got at least a few people who are tuning in right now. If they're thinking about doing a virtual summit, like I was saying, this year is going to be the year that I do this. And honestly, I think that now more than ever is a very good time to be thinking about hosting events, because I believe that all of us are a little bit socially starved. Yeah. And so if you can, just like you've done, create an event that has live components, that has components where people can engage in meaningful conversation and actually feel like they're making progress towards something that they really want to make progress on, that, first of all, that's going to be better than any of their New Year's resolutions, which they probably won't actually follow through on. And so for people who are in this mode of this sounds like it could be a cool thing for me to do, what would you suggest to them? Or what's the takeaway that you might put out there and say, okay, well, here's 2 or 3 things to think about
when you're going to create a summit?
If someone's thinking about creating a summit for the first time.
So I would just make sure that you design it like you would if you were having a live event. What is it? What is this thing? I would design it. I always started mine, instead of, some people start by the people they want. I always started with the content I wanted to get through, and then I would find the people. What is the purpose of it? Who is it serving? Just really answer all those questions really well so that you can want to do it, because I'm not going to lie, it's a lot of upfront work before you can see the reward. So you're going to have to have a strong reason to want to follow through. So that's thing one. Thing two is to really give yourself enough time to get it live. So, it sort of depends on the scale that you're doing. I mean, I feel like in 45 days, you could probably pull off a 1-day one. And it's not that it takes that much time to pull it off. It's just that you want to get your speakers early, give some padding for when you do the interviews, but you really want to give your speakers and yourself enough time to market it so that you have a lot of people, a lot of eyes on it when it goes live, and keep your fingers crossed that it doesn't go on live of a day of a, I don't feel like we can have many more disasters, but knock on wood. And then the third thing I would, well, can I do two more? So there's two more things I would say. The second thing, I guess, is still time related, which is it doesn't end with the summit. And I sort of learned that the hard way the first time. Like the summit's kind of like the middle of the arc, right? Like the summit is, I mean, unless your end goal is the summit and selling the summit, I guess you'd still have to sell it on the other side a bit, but the summit's sort of like the beginning, like for me, it was the beginning of a launch. And so you really have to plan all the way through what it's launching and really consider your energy and your time doing that. So I always wished, and I did this time, and it made a big difference, that I had taken off a couple days before the actual live component because those days are very full. So that's that piece. And then the last one is like, just how can you make it interesting and engaging? So I'll just give you a few examples. Like, so we had those live calls, which were great. And in the last version, I definitely always, in the last two versions, actually, I always had one or two speakers on so that it wasn't just me speaking. And I also had content that I was sharing and was backing out of the program that eventually I would offer them. We had prizes. We had a Facebook group, and we had prizes that we were giving away for participation, which even if you have the best content, like, I mean, I got page-long emails for what people were getting out of it. So I know that people were getting tons of value. And I believe that having these prizes really helped people show up and get into conversation. And, you know, it's like real life. Nobody wants to enter an empty room. So the more people start talking, the more other people talk. So that was pretty helpful. And I think that's it. Those are my thoughts.
Right, great. So you touched on something which was about marketing and promoting these events.
Yep.
And so I'm just going to bring it back to live streaming for a second. Now, I mean, I know an option with the speakers is to do a live video as a promotion for the event itself. And this is something that you did, right?
So what I did was, so I did do a couple lives with a few of the people for sure. Especially the people who had bigger audiences. I kind of let speakers guide like the way that they were best able to share. But what I did do in the middle one, which was right at the beginning of COVID, basically. So it was, I think we were live at the beginning of May. So when we were marketing, it was really at that beginning stage when we all thought it was going to end and none of us were sure how to work from home and all the different pieces. So what I did for that one was all the interviews that I did in those first 6 weeks of staying at home was I would do the interview, which I really wanted to be evergreen. I wanted the interview. I knew that I wanted the interview about, you know, how to build your relationship in 90 days and how to parent better in 90 days and how to build a business in 90 days, whatever the things were. I really wanted them to be timeless. But then what I did was I asked each speaker to stay on 10 extra minutes and give their best advice on that topic for COVID. Oh, right. And that became our marketing material.
Yeah, great idea. Really good strategy. All right, so we've just got a couple of questions, which I think we'll take here.
Okay.
This one says, how does it work when you reuse material your guests provided? Do you pay them accordingly?
So
great question, by the way.
That is a great question. And it's one of the reasons that I would never like repackage and sell it outside of the summit like area, I guess. Though on the last one, I just created a contract so that we could use the content however we wanted. So there's definitely summit contracts out there that you could Google and find quite easily. We didn't pay our speakers to be on. So for us, it was more, we were giving them a platform, you know, to grow their platform. And under every talk, there is a link for listeners to get on the list of a speaker. So if they liked the speaker, they would click the link and they would get on the list of the speakers. So it was list growing for the speakers. And so I just went in with that like very intentionally. And then, you know, speakers got to choose whether they made money. So speakers who shared a lot made money, and people who didn't share, you know, didn't make the affiliate income. So that's kind of how we did that. So the only time I reuse it is on podcasts, and then I reshare it with the guests saying that, look, great, you get on our podcast. We're so happy to give you this exposure. If you want to share, here's some images. So it's more about marketing.
Right. Okay. So we have one more here from Tiffany, and she says, if you're live streaming through Restream, I'm assuming she's referencing free shows, correct? Unless there's a way to monetize the Restream event. And so I'll mention one thing here, and that is, if, you know, when you're doing your summit event, the summit itself is free. At least this is what Mia has been doing. So you have an opportunity, if you choose, to make the event, the live portions of the event, be a streaming event that goes out to the general public, which is also free. And you can use that opportunity, that time, to say, well, you still have time to come and register for the event. And if you want to do that, come right over here. So I don't know, do you want to say more about that?
No, except that I definitely did take some of the stuff out of the event, like during it. So you know, there were a few times when like something would happen and I was just like, this would be cool just to put out to everybody. And so we would do that. But yeah, no, you covered it.
Okay.
You know what, the one thing I would say back to the last question about monetization is I'm just noticing that the person who, I'm going to mispronounce your name, but the person who asked it is a belly dance artist. So I do want to say that I actually did pay all of the people who were teaching dance, yoga, like those kinds of things, like they were teaching a class online. And we made a company decision, you know, to ask if people needed to pay, and be really clear that we would pay minorities. So that was something we decided early on in the last version of it. So there were a couple situations where we did pay. So I wanted to be clear about that.
Wow, that's great. That's really cool. Well, this has been amazing. This has been a really great discussion all about summits. I mean, for anybody who's tuning into this, even if you're watching on the replay, this style, and I'm going to confess that I ran a summit about a year ago, and I just think that this way, like, there are all these different benefits. And so you can grow your authority, you can grow really great relationships with your peers, you know, these other thought leaders in your space, these other people who you may admire. Like, you could pick somebody who you might admire the most and get to know them this way. And of course, grow your audience, really engage your relationship with your audience, and then, you know, ultimately be growing your business entirely. And it sounds like, Mia, you've also succeeded in just enriching the experience of everybody who participated.
Yeah, I mean, we tried. That was the goal. That was the goal.
I mean, I don't know, like, you've told me stories about people have given you feedback and said, that was so amazing.
Yeah. No, we definitely got like pages, like paragraphs, as I said, of just feedback and thank you. And, you know, again, that's where it comes back to the design. Like, what is the outcome of the day or the 2 days or whatever it is of the event? Like, what is the outcome for people and how can you hit that? And so we just made sure that people had ours were mostly about planning. So we just made sure to give people some wins, you know, some quick wins that they could have by implementing what they were learning.
Right. All right. So if people want to get a hold of you, follow up with your stuff, join your next summit, any of the above. Sure. What's the best way for them to hook up with you?
So we have a website, which is plansimple.com, and there are a lot of different things on the homepage to sign up for and get access to, most of which are, you know, different ways of planning. And we also are, I think the most active place I am is Instagram. So on Instagram, we're plansimple.co. And actually on Facebook, we're plansimple.co as well. And then we have a podcast called the Plan Simple Podcast, which you can find, anywhere that podcasts are heard.
Right. Plan simple.
Plan
it's
simple.
so simple.
Plan simple. It is.
So easy to remember. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you guys who are here live watching. We're going live every single Thursday at 3. It's really easy to remember. Live stream stories, Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. You can join us next week. Got another great guest who's going to come in and talk all about really cool stuff to do with, her work is all about the nonprofit world and how to be a thriving nonprofit in times of crisis. And she has put on a weekly video podcast series. And as a result, she has now become nationwide the leading authority for nonprofits in crisis, simply because she was willing to do a weekly live stream series way back in March when COVID was striking. And she's a former client of mine, and we were working on this together, and it's just done extremely well for her and her business. So if you're interested in anything to do with, maybe video podcasting is a good idea for me, tune in next week, Thursday at 3. And once again, I'm going to thank Restream. And if you're interested in signing up for Restream, the link is right here. It's restream.io/join/showup. They are the ones responsible for this whole series. So thanks, everyone, and we will see you